Embiid stepping back and stroking two. Bogdanovich thinking about a three. There it is. Yes!
See it again. No double team help, and Embiid takes it right to the rack.
Embiid, step back, jumper, you bet!
There he is again. The Euro step there. Embiid getting Gobert in a fight.
What's going on, everybody? This is Monday afternoon, 4 o'clock. We have Game 4 tonight, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. As always, I am your host, Austin Krell, along with a friend of mine through the business, Bryan Toporek. He covers the Sixers. I'm not really sure who it's for because there's like a bunch of different outlets listed. I'm going to go for Forbes at the moment because I think that's the right one.
Yeah.
But Forbes, fan-sided, and he's the quality editor at Bleacher Report. He's also a new dad for the first time. So he's got all this chaos going on in the Toporek household right now. Bryan, how are you?
I'm good, Austin. How are you?
I'm probably a little less tired than you are.
Yeah.
But I still feel like these playoffs have tired me out. My first playoff was in the NBA, but I don't think I can complain compared to you.
No, you know what? The baby actually started sleeping through the night 2 weeks ago. But the thing that you don't find out until after you have a baby is that they go through these sleep regressions. So like he slept for 7 hours for 2 weeks, and then a couple nights ago was just like, nope, I'm done with this. So yeah, it's been a rough couple days, but
I thought you were out of the water. You thought you were the first couple months.
Hopefully Game 4 puts me in a better mood.
That's right. So big game tonight, obviously. I don't think we can understate just how important Danny Green is to this team. Even if he's not always lighting up the box score or at least mitigating his end of the damage on defense, he's still a guy that's been an invaluable leader to this group on the floor. He's been there vocally when things have gotten maybe a little bit rough in games sometimes. So he's an invaluable guy to this team. And even if he's not knocking down shots or having a good series, he's still a guy that his value sometimes you'll see like he's always in the right position on defense. So even if the value isn't there, like where he's like you can look at a spreadsheet and see it, there's still things that because of his presence on the court, it kind of stops and stymies the Hawks from going in a certain direction, and it puts them back going to the other side of the court as a result of him being in the right place. So invaluable guy there for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's a real bummer. As you said, I mean, this has not been his finest playoff series by any means, but yeah, you can at least trust he's going to be in the right place at the right time. He's not going to lead to defensive breakdowns because he's the one who's blowing a coverage. I think, unfortunately, the Hawks do have the offensive personnel that have given him some trouble. I mean, Trae Young in Game 1 we saw, they switched him to Bogdanovich, and Bogdanovich also was having his way with Danny a little bit. So, I think it's a loss that the Sixers can survive in this series. They're going to need him back to win the title, though.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think the team hasn't really given any kind of indication as to how bad it was yet. But those, what is it? It's the calf strain. Those are not fun injuries. Those are like the one kind of strain that you can't really like get a feel for. You can't really sort of massage away from on a game to game basis. So he has to just get better and get through that. I mean, that's what Kevin Durant had. He came back and then tore his Achilles. So you got to be careful with that for sure. But Doc does have a decision tonight of whether to start Korkmaz, Thibault, Milton, Hill, or Tyrese Maxey. I guess would be the ostensible pieces there to go with. And I've been thinking about this game for a while because like everything has gone so well for them, not just in this series, except for the first half of Game 1, but these playoffs. So like losing Danny it sort of messes up with like the rhythm and the continuity. But at the same time, if at the end of it all we're saying, oh, they lost the series because Danny Green got hurt, you probably weren't a real contender anyway. So
that's a good point. Yeah.
So I don't think they're going to lose the series by any stretch of the imagination because of Danny Green. However, I do think it poses an interesting maybe difficult decision to make. Do you want the defense or do you want the offense? And yesterday, a reporter tried to get Doc to bite on the do you want defense or offense? And Doc was like, I'm going to start a 76er. So I thought that was pretty funny. Who would you go with?
Yeah, it's a good question. When Danny went down, my gut instinct was to start Thibault in his place because I just figured Ben on Trey, Thibault on Bogdan. I leaned defense over offense.
Yeah.
That said, I mean, we saw in the second half, Korkmaz started, and he's not the reason they blew up in that game. It was aggressive Ben Simmons is why they blew up in the game. But Korkmaz does provide the advantage of you can't hide Trae Young on him. I thought Game 3 was really the first time they actively sought out Trae Young on defense and just kept trying to attack him. Cork in particular, when he came off the bench in the first quarter and really started that rally late in the first, I thought that was big for him, and they really seemed to give him the confidence. Really, I guess my big question is which Sixer stayed after Game 3 to get up shots, because it seems like that's been
the right guy.
The secret sauce for the last, Shake did it, now Ferk did it. So, I hope Tyrese Maxey was in the gym or George Hill. But I lean actually starting Ferk for the offense to not give Trae a place to hide defensively. I do worry that Bogdan is going to go after him hard. And if that's the case, you probably have to, pull the cord quick and get Thibault in there. But at the same time, if you start Simmons and Thibault and one of those guys picks up 2 early fouls, that screws up what you're trying to do defensively against Trae as well. So I think, Doc all season has really seemed to favor continuity with this, mostly keeping the starters together, mostly keeping the bench unit together. We know who the main guys off the bench are going to be: George, Thibault, Dwight, and then just whichever of the guards, Shake, Maxey, Furkan, have it going at the time.
Yeah.
So I thought Furkan, especially after Shake's Game 2 explosion, I thought his role was probably most up in the air. So I think, starting him, putting him with the starters where you're not relying on him as a main offensive source. It's just like Ben's going to drive and kick, and if Furkan's open, he's not going to have a conscience. He's going to shoot that shot. So I think, there's no perfect answer here, but I think Cork is probably the way they're going to go just based on how Game 3 played out.
Yeah. I did a little bit of digging today before shoot around, and I totally understand if you didn't see these numbers because you have a son, you have a wife, you have a life. I do not have any of those things. So I naturally do fish around for extraneous stats. And what I found today was I looked at 5 guys. I think there's 5 plausible starters to go that could be put into that unit. Maxey was one. Hill was another. Shake, Thibault, and Korkmaz, as we've talked about. Furkan has played 28 minutes with the other 4 starters, plus 33 per 100. So that's pretty good. That's not pretty good. That's very good.
Yeah, it's okay.
Sample size, obviously not too high. The next best was Shake at 50. Well, no, he was the best, but his sample size was higher at 50.7. So they're plus 50.7 in 50 minutes. So that's very, 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 very promising. Mm-hmm. Better sample size too. So that they're blowing people away with that lineup. Wouldn't shock me there. Thibault is only plus 6.3 in 23 minutes. Now that kind of makes sense though, because with the idea of the shooting and the spacing, the defense might be fantastic, but the offense is going to lend itself to a struggle, obviously. Surprisingly, Hill has not played with the starters yet. So I thought that might have been an option because of like the veteran presence. He can make a 3. He can defend well. He did a really good job of denying Trae Young different looks in off ball. Maxey's a plus 44.6 in only 4 minutes of play. So I don't. Those are all like mind-boggling numbers, but you can make a very stringent argument against starting any of those guys. I think it's going to be Korkmaz when all is said and done, like you do. But I think it's because like with Danny, he doesn't really put the ball on the deck, and that lends itself to an advantage for Trae Young because all he has to do really is just you can hide him on there, but all he has to do is just close out. And as long as he's not like shuffling his feet like an idiot, as long as he's not like jumping into guys, you can basically
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. The George Hill's one interesting because after the trade deadline, I remember in Daryl's press conference describing kind of what George brought to the table. He was talking about how George is a great two-way player, and with Danny, you could have a closing lineup with the big three, and then Danny and George, where it's like you have 5 two-way guys. So I guess it makes sense that he was replacing Seth in that instead of Danny. But I'd be interested to see George with the starters, even if he doesn't get the start. Just play him at times with them, because it does feel like they need more from him offensively in this series. He's talked a lot since the trade deadline about just kind of trying to feel his way out. He's coming back from the thumb injury too. It's a new team. There hasn't been a ton of practice time. But you acquire George Hill for a reason. It isn't just his defense. He's a great catch and shoot guy, but also can operate on and off the ball as well. So, the good thing is that Doc has options, right? It's not like something like Danny is so irreplaceable to this team.
It's not James Ennis, I'll tell you that.
No, definitely. And it's not, like when Kyrie goes down in the Nets game yesterday, it's like all of a sudden the Nets are just drawing dead, basically. Like, I don't think the Sixers are going into this game being like, all right, we're packing it up, going back to Philly down 2 or tied 2-2. Like they still have a very realistic chance of winning this game. Yeah.
And speaking of the Nets series, like, not to say that we can automatically deduce that the same injuries would have happened because it's a butterfly effect. But those concerns that the Nets now have, where they don't have Kyrie because of the ankle for who knows how long, there seems to be an unknown as to when James Harden comes back. One day he's on a doorstep, other day there's a gap between. Right now it's looking like Kevin Durant is the only available star to suit up for game 5. And by the way, the Nets traded away basically all their depth to get James Harden. So that's not looking too great. So that is the risk that you take in trading for a guy like James Harden. And right now it's looking like it could very well come back to bite the Nets and leave them short of the conference finals. But we'll see about that. A long way to go there. But it doesn't look like it's going to get any better for Trae Young, because what was just reported minutes ago, NBA's competition committee met Monday to further explore rule changes to restrict unnatural motions on jump shots players use to draw fouls. NBA wants to limit players, including stars like Trae Young and James Harden, from leaning backwards and sideways and to draw fouls. So evidently bullying works. Wow.
Can they implement this rule in the next 3 hours? Is it possible?
I think the owners probably not approve that as but one can dream, right? Yeah. But that's interesting that right now, we're in the throes of competition.
Yeah,
and that report comes out.
Well, Matisse has so many what the hell? I did nothing wrong reactions after
the outside of the building holding a protest sign.
Yeah,
like enact the rule, please.
Yeah.
So you have the Clippers out west, and they obviously got rid of Doc Rivers last season, and it looked like for a while at least it was possible that they could meet the same fate that they met last year, if not worse, depending on how the first round played out. But I gotta tell you, I think Doc has done a really good job, not just this season, but in these playoffs with making adjustments. In game 1, I asked him this because I guess I could have worded it better, where he wasn't like, well, no, I wasn't trying to lose the game, but it felt to me like he was trying to feel out the series a little bit, to feel out the matchups. And so he puts he puts Danny on Trey, and Trey lights him up like a Christmas tree. Ever since then, I think Danny's possessions on Trey have been completely minimized. In game 2, it was like 2 possessions total in the half court. In game 3, obviously Danny gets hurt, so you can't really quantify that. But it feels like they've done a really good job of just trying to keep size on him at all times, even like behind the pick and rolls. So they're just running spread pick and rolls with Clint or with John Collins. Tobias is coming up to show high, and Trey's like, "Oh, I can't shoot over him. I gotta like put this on the floor." Or if Ben's fighting through it and getting over it, and they're just really kind of taking away Trey's vision of the rim, and they're also making it harder for him to see over bigger defenders. I feel like because they're crowding him with so much size, and I think that's really paid off, and it's sort of mitigated all the damage that he did since game 1.
Yeah, I mean, Doc, I think culture-wise, this whole season, the players have preached about him repeatedly. But yeah, I totally agree with you. Throughout these playoffs, other than the first half of game 1, he's just. It seems like he has a great pulse on the team, and he knows like which buttons to push at the right time. I mean, how many times have we panicked when the all bench lineup comes out, or like when Shake Milton comes out at the end of the third quarter in game 2, they're only up 1 point. We're like, Shake Milton hasn't hit a shot in a month. Like, what are you doing? And then he completely swings that game. Furkan in game 3, I didn't expect to see him a ton, and all of a sudden he's hitting big shots in the first quarter and finishes with, I think, 14 points, and is now looking at a potential spot start in game 4 and beyond. So it does seem like Doc so far at least, knock on wood, this continues, but so far he has pushed the right buttons at the right times. And yeah, I mean, it's a testament to the players for executing the scheme, especially Joel Embiid on a torn meniscus. But, he talked about like the cat and mouse game he's playing defensively, where he's going up high sometimes, or he's playing drop sometimes. He just doesn't. They're varying their coverages, which I think is good. Like we've seen, from the Bucks, especially in the past few years in the playoffs, where they have their drop scheme and that's all they do. And if you figure that out, goodbye Milwaukee Bucks. The Sixers so far, the Hawks beat the pants off of them in the first half of game 1, but they weren't so stubborn as to say, okay, well, the players just weren't executing a scheme. It's like, no, maybe the scheme sucked. Let's try something different. Yeah. And it like, I'm seeing this with the Clippers too. It just drives me crazy when you have 2 of the best perimeter defenders in the NBA with, Ben and Matisse for Philly, Kawhi and Paul George for the Clippers. If you're going against like a high usage 3-level scoring guard, just have your 2 best guys defend that guy. Like, we don't need to get into the switch everything. I feel like sometimes coaches outthink themselves here. Yeah. Whereas this really shouldn't be like Doc all year has said Danny struggled with the type of guards that Trae Young is. So I don't know. I agree with you. I think they were probably trying to feel out the series and, get Ben and Matisse maybe just to like be aware of Trae's shenanigans, because they knew as the series goes on, we're going to need to put you guys on them more. So here's what you need to watch out for so you don't get into foul trouble. But as soon as they made that switch, it's just been the Sixers have been dominating. Yeah.
And Doc said it, like, if you go back and you look at the games they played against the Hawks early in the regular season, first game, it was the COVID game. So you had it was literally like Dwight and Joe were in the starting half. That's the level of like scientific shenanigans that the Sixers were up to when the COVID stuff was happening. And then game 2, which was the doubleheader in Philly, that was like Trae Young wasn't there, Bojan wasn't there, and the Sixers just ran him out of the building. And credit to the Sixers, Trae came back for the third game, and that's what Doc said they watched footage of as the third game to get an idea. But in that third game, Danny was very, very able to handle Trae. There was a play where Trae had to pass out of a shot because Danny wasn't falling for his antics. But then again, Bojan wasn't playing in that game, or neither was DeAndre Hunter. So in theory, maybe if you have another shooter on the court instead of Solomon Hill, the help defender plays a little bit closer, and then suddenly Trae's like, well, I have this angle now. I can attack it. Whereas he didn't have that in the third game of the season. So there's a bunch of different testing going on throughout the series. But you make a great point about the different guys showing up. Doc had a really good pulse on his team in game 2 in the second half with Shake coming in. Furkan game 3, and really game 5 against the Wizards. Like he has done a masterful job of pulling all the right strings and having a good gut for this team, which is something that Brett Brown didn't do, something that Brett Brown didn't have. And I think that speaks to really his, not only his basketball acumen, but his knowledge of the game and understanding of what he has. And I would venture to say it's probably won them at least game, maybe 2 in not only in these playoffs, but really in this series. Because I mean, they win game 2 because of Shake Milton. Furkan's points, I don't want to say the separator in game 3, but it changes some things, I think, down the stretch. So Doc has done a masterful job with that. And not even just like the way that he inserts different guys at the different moments, like the different defensive schemes, not just the drop coverage, but like they were icing Trey a little bit. So like he was trying, they were doing the double drag, which Atlanta loves double drag with Collins and Capella. And with the double drag, like they were showing high on the second screen. So Trey couldn't go around it. And then he had to go to the middle of the floor to get it by anybody. And Joel was right there to stop him. So, like he had nowhere to go. So they've done a really good job of not only like adjusting, but almost being like a little bit playing dumb, if you will, a little bit like the media, and being a little bit like what's the word? I forget the word, but basically saying like, well, we don't know. We're just gonna watch. We're gonna adjust. Come to the next game. Lo and behold, it's a whole different coverage. Like they're doing completely different. So they've done Doc's done a fantastic job of I think assessing where and when and what to change, and that's why they're up 2-1, looking to go 3-1 tonight. But the other story of Game 3, Ben Simmons, his third quarter was sensational. My dad called me at my dad was at the shore. I had to work that day, so I was at work, and then I covered the game. I came down like 12:30 that night at the shore. My dad calls me at halftime. He's like, "I would trade Ben Simmons." He's like, he sucks. He's he's this, he's that. I'm like, you're basically every person on Twitter. Like, that's basically what you are, Dad. And then I call him midway through the third quarter. I said, "You owe Ben an apology." I'm not apologizing for nothing. Ben dominated the Hawks thoroughly in that third quarter. Just absolutely went to work. And credit to Doc for getting him more involved in the offense. They ran a couple of those. I think it's called Chicago Slice. Credit to Dan Ollinger of Liberty Ballers for doing a great film breakdown on that on Twitter. But they did a tremendous job of basically just getting Ben more involved in the offense in the post.
Yeah, I mean, Derek Bodner of The Athletic tweeted a clip of this, I think, during the game, but also included it in his breakdown afterward. There was, late in the first half, Ben is like under the rim. It could easily go for a layup or even a dunk. It wasn't even like a layup. Like, he is just right under. There is no one who can really contest that shot. He passes it out with like 3 seconds left to Seth, who was covered, I think, which ended
it was a shot clock violation.
Yeah. So, there's a fine line between like the Ben Simmons discourse is just a whole,
it's nauseating.
Own monster at this point. But like, he's not going to be LeBron James. He's never going to develop into that high level of a scorer. But you do just need him to be selectively aggressive, is how I phrase it. Like, you are wasting possessions. You don't want him to take 8 threes in a playoff game like Giannis, because he's not going to hit many, if any of them. You're wasting possessions. You want your offense to run through Joel, Tobias, Joe through the shooters. Like, Ben, his purpose is driving and kicking, and then if they're double covering Joe, then that's going to open lanes for him. We saw it in the Wizards series as well, how, there are certain games he dominated. Game 1 as a facilitator. Game 2, he took over more as a scorer. So it doesn't even need to be a full game of aggressive Ben Simmons. Maybe you just play it out and see, okay, this is how they're defending Joe tonight. This is how I need to react accordingly. But yeah, I think you said it well. Doc said after the game, they went to Ben at halftime and really challenged him to get more aggressive. And we saw that in the third quarter. So, I mean, I think especially with Hunter out and with Reddish out, we're seeing some of the same storylines play out we did in the Wizards series, where it's just like the Hawks do not have the forwards to defend Ben or Tobias. And if they just take advantage of those mismatches, especially with what Embiid is doing as well, it's like if you can't defend any of the Sixers' 3 best players, you're probably not going to win this series.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's kind of funny. Like they had Gallinari on him. Ben saw Gallinari and was like licking his lips. He was, it was a jab to the left, and then I'm not going to jab. I'm going to go around you, and you're going to have to grab me by the hips and like dance with me in order to like stop me. And Ben was like going to the free throw line, and he missed 3 of them, I think, but Gallinari was like, I got no shot. I'm going to just wrap this guy up and let him get free shots at the line because there's no way.
Yeah, I mean, there was I think he took only 3 shots in game 2, but the one he missed, it was, again, one-on-one Simmons on Gallinari, and like Ben was backing him down in the post and then just took like a really wide step around him and tried to force a layup that he missed. It was just like, this is another area where it's like, Ben, he needs to develop a jumper. Yes, to reach his ceiling, to maximize the Sixers ceiling. Yes, that would help. A good player needs to get better. This is not news.
Breaking, wow, headline.
Yeah. But it was like, if you have that matchup, you do need to score 2 points. Or as you said, just draw a foul. Because even if you miss both of those free throws, you're getting your team one step closer to the bonus. And when you have Joel Embiid, who is a foul drawing magnet, like all of a sudden you could be in the bonus with 6, 7, 8 minutes left in the quarter. And that's going to help break out any, if your offense gets bogged down at times, just throw it to the big man and have him draw a foul.
Yeah. Or by the way, when you're in the bonus with that much time left, you're also actively creating more rest for yourself within the game without having to sub out because you're waiting for the guy at the free throw line. Now, granted, he's not Giannis. He doesn't need like a minute and a half at the free throw line to then brick a free throw anyway. But it does give you time to recharge and get ready for the next possession. But I think with like the Ben discourse, and I do love how like Ben says, well, I'm just looking for my guys, and I want to get them involved. Yeah, you got them involved. You threw the ball to Seth, who has had no chance of getting anything done in that possession. Like you really bailed him out there,
right?
And really, you just added to his turnover total because he had no chance of getting that. But like, the thing I said about Ben is, like, people want to complain and want to cry about like 3 shots. How could the guy take 3 shots? He's a max player. If Ben is, if Joel is in the MVP conversation and Tobias is a fringe all-star, those guys have to get more shots to score more points. That means, by the way of math, just by simple math, someone has to take less shots. Ben Simmons is the guy taking less shots. That's why this is happening. So if you want to you can't say oh, this is fantastic, Joel's the MVP favorite, and then clown Ben Simmons for taking 3 shots, because one of those 2 things has to give in order for that dynamic to work. Right. You have to mix those things together somehow. So I do think that Ben has to be more consistent and aggressive, and like he has to make up his mind. Hey, I'm going to get to the rim against this guy every time. And there were times when like he had Trae Young on him in first couple games, he wasn't recognizing it, and it was like, I'm passing out of this. Like, no, you need to get him like under you and get him to foul you and go to the line. Even if you miss both free throws, you're getting him one step closer to being shelved for the next 6 minutes of play, which is massive. Yes. So the Ben I think was as big of a reason they win that game as anything.
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
Now speaking of Ben and mismatches, you did have some John Collins takes, and I think now would be as good a time as any to let you unravel them.
If I'm the Atlanta Hawks and I'm facing the dilemma of whether to match a John Collins max offer or near max offer this summer, I am saying goodbye, John Collins. Good luck on your next team, because I just do not think he is the right fit for that team, especially at that price point. I think now, if like the fact that the Hawks are even competitive in this series without DeAndre Hunter, who is just low key very important to what they do, like their best 2-way forward by far. Yeah. It's a testament really to the talent of this team. But if you can rock next year, like you could start a lineup of Trae, Bogdan, Reddish, DeAndre Hunter at the 4, Clint Capella. You still have Kevin Huerter and Gallo off the bench. You have, Okonkwo, you have Chris Dunn, you have whoever you pick in the draft. Like that's a rock solid 10-man rotation without even considering who you're taking in free agency, like any trades you make, whatever the case may be. So like the Hawks have something here. I am super high on their future, regardless of how this series plays out. And I just think, the modern day NBA, it's hard to start a power forward like John Collins. I think it's hard to do this too big lineup unless, if you have an Anthony Davis and you want to get away with it in the regular season because he doesn't want to play center until the playoffs, that's fine. But, the more that we're seeing the Tobias Harrises and Jason Tatum's playing 4 at times, like we've seen this, what would have been a tweener 5 to 10 years ago, that's just the modern day 4 now. So a guy like John Collins, he's going to get, he can average 20 and 10 and great. I think, good regular season player. I don't know that he's cut out necessarily to be a max player, especially considering, like if you look at the box score, what he's doing in this series, he's averaging 17 and 7. But a lot of that is Trey just creating for him and him dunking home lobs, right? Like he's not creating for himself. He's not providing much of an impact on defense. So it's like, what are you bringing to the table that's going to make you worthy of being the second highest paid player on this team once Trae Young gets his extension?
Right. Like so many of the points that he scored in the series have been just like transition. I'm going to sprint ahead, wait for the angle to come, and then I'm just going to dive at the rim and I'm going to jump and Trey's going to lob it to me and I'm going to get a dunk out of this.
Right.
And like he hasn't shot the lights out, except I think he shot pretty well in game 1, but he hasn't been a massive pain as a stretch guy. And I mean, I guess theoretically you could lean into we're going to go small ball and maybe you get rid of Capella and then you run John at the 5. And I mean, I don't know what the numbers look like on that. I venture to say he probably can't play too much small ball 5. But the principle of just we're going to go all out. We're going to spread it out, 5 guys out on the floor. We're going to drag your big out to the perimeter, and we're going to run layup lines around you. I think John Collins could be conducive to that, but I'm not paying him a max contract. I mean, so many guys we're just throwing out the max contract. Now, a guy has one season where he averages 18 points a game, or one season where he averages 20 or breaks through there. And it's oh, well, I'm just going to go get my max contract now. Let's try again. Let's try again.
I mean, you bring up a fair point. I think, as well as Doc has been coaching in this series, I feel like Nate McMillan has left a lot on the table. And
yes,
if I agree, John Collins at the 5, not a permanent solution, but considering how the Sixers have struggled defending stretch bigs, especially Dwight defending stretch bigs, it's crazy to me that we have not seen John Collins play much of the 5 in this series. There should be small ball, whenever Clint Capella is on the floor, there should be 5 out lineups for Atlanta.
Yep, absolutely. I'll tell you this, it isn't even, and going off of that, it isn't even Capella has been a massive 20 and 15 guy this series that has cemented himself as somebody who you just can't take off the floor in this series. He hasn't been that. Joel has neutralized him. He averaged, I think, 13 and 15 this season. It is what Capella averaged. He's getting a pedestrian 10 rebounds a game in this series. So he hasn't really done anything to warrant this, I'm married to this guy at the 5. They could easily be going with John Collins at the 5 spot, which I think kind of breaks into the next point of what the Hawks have left to do. I was actually reading some of the Athletic stuff from their point of view yesterday, just because I was watching Nets game. I was bored. And the beat guys were I was kind of surprised by how the beat guys for the Hawks were kind of writing a eulogy. It was they were very much so well, they had a good run, but this team, it just felt like Friday. This team was done for. I'm thinking, the hell are you talking about? This team is a very good team. I think the Hawks are a much bigger thorn in the side than anyone has given them credit for. I mean, they had the anomalous game in game 1 where they shot 20 of 47 from 3. And granted, some of that is they're just a very good shooting team, from a personnel standpoint. Other part of it is the Sixers have ratcheted up the defense tremendously. But this Hawks team has a lot of tools that theoretically can hurt the Sixers. They have a low center of gravity point guard. They have a bunch of guys that can clear off the dribble. This Hawks team, I don't think is done by any stretch. I think I wouldn't surprise me at all if they win tonight and it's 2-2 going back to Philly. But what do you think the Hawks have left that they can really adjust to? I mean, like you said, the John Collins small ball lineups, but I guess like you could, instead of going with Solomon Hill or Tony Snell.
Yes, that is exactly what I would.
About what you can do.
I mean, when I say Nate McMillan has left stuff on the table, like that was one of my big questions coming into the series. This was before I knew Hunter was out, so I thought he was actually going to play. But I thought there wasn't a good place for Seth Curry to hide defensively in this series. Like we saw him. I think Snell was the one starting in that third regular season game, so he spent most of his time there. But yeah, I mean, giving him a place to hide on Solomon Hill for the first 3 games, because like Solomon Hill is not going to break Seth Curry down off the dribble. Solomon Hill, that's just not his game. So yeah, it's wild that they in place of Solomon Hill in the second half, they started Tony Snell. It's like, that's no better. That you're replacing one forward who's not going to do this with another. So I would go. I know Nate McMillan says he likes Kevin Huerter off the bench, but I would lean towards starting Huerter in game 4. And you have, Trey, Huerter, Bogdan, especially with Danny Green out. If you have Curry and Korkmaz in the backcourt, that's 2 wink links to go after defensively. And, maybe it doesn't matter because you have that back line of Simmons, Tobias, and Joel, but all 3 of those guys can rain threes. And I think that's been one of the big keys of the series. As you said, the game 1, they just shot the lights out of the ball. Ever since, the Sixers have made a real focus of just stopping them, not even making them miss 3-point shots, stopping them from taking them.
Yeah.
But I mean, the Sixers early in the season, especially, found themselves on the wrong side of that math equation more often than not, where they just weren't taking a high volume of threes and they were losing these close games because they were getting wildly outscored from deep. So if I'm Atlanta, I don't have hopes of beating the Sixers at their own game. Like, the Sixers have the second best defense in the league. We're not going to out defense them. So I'm just going to put as many possible scoring threats out on the floor together. And you still have Gallo and Lou Williams off the bench. It's not like your bench is completely devoid of scoring threats, even if you put Huerter in the starting lineup. But yeah, I mean, I would shorten the rotation. I would basically go those 5, Gallo, Lou, and then, if you need a few spot minutes from Solomon Hill or Tony Snell, fine. But like, this should really be a 7-man rotation tonight.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this is not a lineup solution that you can gravitate towards and to win a series. But if you have Simmons in there, you have any of the Sixers guards that are younger in there, you're going to sacrifice a lot on defense doing this. But Trey and Lou on the floor at the same time, you have a lot of potency in terms of, like, I'm going to beat you in 2,000 in a row and get you off the game and knocked out of the half. They could do that in the end of the first quarter, middle of the second quarter, when you're not in as high leverage moments as you are in the fourth quarter. But just to get 2 quick fouls on any number of Sixers with this contact baiting, I think would be a massive thing for the Hawks to do. I also think, like, one thing the Sixers have done a lot better in this series that I thought they would be is playing the lobs really well in the half court.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like Simmons has done a really good job of gambling when the lob takes off instead of like waiting for it too long. And as a result, they've knocked the ball away from Collins and Capella a ton to get in transition. And it's been really good at the rim for them. If I'm the Hawks, I'm going to wait and draw that defender maybe a little bit farther away, just by like putting a little bit pressure on the rim. And then I'm going to throw the lob. And that way, like, Simmons can't gamble too far off, or else Trey's making a skip pass to the weak side. So, I probably be like, hey, listen, like, you got to wait a little bit longer on that pass, time a little bit later. We'll still be there for you. But you don't give them as much time to gamble and recover on that lob pass. And I think that could change things a little bit. But I still ultimately think that the Sixers, they take care of game 2. that game was as stressful as they come as well.
Yeah.
Because the Sixers still weren't playing that well after the first quarter.
No.
And game 3, I was kind of surprised at how stress-free it was for the most part, other than Embiid grabbing his legs. Anytime he grabs his legs, I'm just start drinking scotch. Let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what is your pulse on this series? It sounds like you're pretty confident in the Sixers have this at hand.
I mean, I think the adjustments they've made have been the right ones, and I'm glad it didn't take them too long to make them. I'm curious to see if McMillan makes some of the obvious ones for game 4, because it felt like really they should have done it for game 3 and they didn't. I guess, you figure you're going home, you split at home, you stole home court advantage, so you feel like you have the upper hand in that series, but at the same time, you lose one game at home and you've given it right back. So the Hawks team just kind of felt, I don't want to say complacent, but not making those adjustments preemptively, even though it was very obvious that Solomon Hill was providing nothing for you. I think Doc is just going to outcoach Nate McMillan in this series based on how the first 3 games have gone. I'm really curious to see how tonight plays out, especially with who the Sixers start in place of Green. If it's Korkmaz, do they target him defensively? How does a Curry-Korkmaz backcourt hold up? I think you're totally right about, foul baiting. Lord knows Trey has been doing it the whole series. Not, Joel's not innocent in that regard either. So
Sixers fans cannot be too quick to whine about foul baiting, nor can Hawks fans. But
no,
Sixers fans have been treated to a fair share of their favorable foul baiting over the years. That's
yes, yeah. But I think to your earlier point about the Hawks, I think go back to before the start of the playoffs when the brackets are set. It's Brooklyn, Milwaukee on the other side, and it's Hawks, Knicks in the first round. There was some question, I think, Harrison Grimm of Liberty Ballers posted a poll, who would you rather see in the second round? And most people picked the Hawks, which just blew my mind. The Knicks would have gotten swept. The Knicks would have been a stress-free, easy. I mean, if you think they struggled offensively against the Hawks, imagine what they would do against the Sixers. They'd average 80 points a game.
Mind you, the Knicks lost to the Sixers once this season in New York without Joel Embiid playing.
Yes.
So,
right.
What would they have done with him playing?
Nothing good. So, I think really since the start of the playoffs, people were underrating the Hawks. At the time, DeAndre Hunter was coming back, so I thought that was going to be a big missing piece for them because he had missed so much of the season. But early on, he was great. I mean, he was the first 15 games or so of the season, it looked like he was taking a big second-year leap. So I thought him getting back into the picture was going to be huge for them, and I picked them to beat the Knicks pretty handily in that series, which thankfully aged well. I think with Hunter out, with Reddish out, it's just tough unless they figure out some counter for Embiid. I think that's really been the story of the series, right? Game 1, Trae Young had his way, at least the first half, and they had done enough damage to hold off the Sixers by the end. But the Sixers have figured out a way to slow down Trae Young. You're not going to stop Trae Young completely. He's going to get, 25 points, 10 assists. But if you can make him turn the ball over, do it inefficiently, that's all you can ask for. I think they've done that well.
Yeah.
The Hawks still have no answer for Joel Embiid. I mean, he had a Jokic-esque almost triple-double in game 3. His development, we've talked all year about the development, the shooting, the mid-range game. But his development as a passer, too, just cannot go understated because he would get, in past playoffs especially, he knew, all right, I'm the focal point of the offense. They're going to double team me, but he got flustered by those. This year, it's just he has gotten so much better at reading the floor and making – there was one pass he made that was just outrageous. I think it was to Seth on the complete opposite side of the court.
Yes, Seth, I remember seeing, I think Seth missed the shot.
He did.
But I remember thinking, Jesus Christ.
that should go in highlight reels, even though Seth missed the shot. It should still go in an Embiid highlight rule because it was just he just didn't have that in his bag before this year.
Those are the plays that everyone fawns over Jokic for.
Yeah.
And Embiid's there making them. And by the way, I think if Embiid ever, number one, health permitting, of course, but if he can ever get himself to a point where he has a positive assist turnover ratio, then that's when you have a bona fide, not even MVP candidate, but this guy is the best player in the league.
Yeah.
And like the other night, he had 8 assists. I think he had 1 turnover, maybe. And I was like, that is the most complete game Joel has really played maybe all season, from what I can remember. But that was massive that he was able to take care of the ball. So I don't really have a read on the night. I think you're going to figure out what team is what team in the first quarter. Like, if the Sixers come out just blazing hot and the Hawks look basically out of it, I think the series is ostensibly over, just because you win game 4 in their building, you take their hearts. They have to then travel to Philly to win game 5, where, listen, good luck to you. Yeah. Whereas, I still think the Sixers would win the series in 6, even if the Hawks win tonight. Yeah. But I think the Sixers can really put themselves in an excellent position, obviously, to get to the conference finals if they take care of business tonight, for sure. A couple other things around the NBA. The one thing that Joel Embiid did not do, like Nikola Jokic, with the triple-double, was then go ahead and swing on a guy,
get suspended,
down for a rebound, and get ejected.
Yeah.
What a bizarre way to end a season for Embiid.
It was. My favorite part was how all of Nuggets Twitter was like, that's a flagrant 1, and everyone else was like, that's a clear flagrant 2. Get this dude out of the game. He karate chopped someone in the face.
I was at dinner, and I picked the wrong game to go to dinner, obviously, but I'm scrolling back through Twitter on my way home, and all I see is 3 wows in a row. So I need to find the video of what the wowing is about. And then, lo and behold, it's a Jokic gets ejected. So I'm trying to find the video. Honestly, the replay shows it wasn't as bad as the live action showed. And I thought Kevin Harlan was going to go bananas like he does on every dramatic call. But it was a very clear wind up and shot. You can't do that. And he didn't, but Cameron Payne obviously sold that too, because he wasn't hit in the face. There was no contact to the face. It was I don't know if it was a play on the ball, but it was definitely not as bad as it looked. But what are you doing in that instance? You're very clear, you wound up and you chop the guy. You can't do that. It's obviously a flagrant 2. Everyone knows it. And that's the way the season ends, unfortunately, for Nikola Jokic. And the irony, of course, being that he wins an MVP trophy on the basis of availability, only to not be available when his team needed him the most.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it was a clear frustration foul. You're down 3-0. It looks like you're going to get swept in that, in game 4. And emotions just got the best of him. So I don't want it to say, because he got ejected, he shouldn't have won MVP. He was a deserving MVP. Yes. And this is that series doesn't reflect on a full strength Nuggets team. Chris Paul and Devin Booker versus Austin Rivers and Facundo Campazzo. That's what I said going into the series. That's what I say coming out. It was such a all-star team versus G League mismatch that the Nuggets had no chance. I did not understand the optimism coming from Nuggets fans going into that series, where they're I picked the Suns in 5 and caught crap from some Nuggets fans who I need to actually go troll today. But they're like, Jokic isn't going to lose 4 in 5 games. I'm like, you know what? Actually, you are right. He did not lose 4 in 5 games.
The fan who got in trouble for punching the other guy on our school was actually a fortune teller. He said Suns in 4, and he was absolutely right. It was Suns in 4. I tell you what I've learned in these playoffs. I've actually grown to hate not just the Miami Heat fan base, but every fan base, including the Sixers fans. I do not like any fan base. I am the unbiased third-party observer who's like, you know what? All of you people are impossible and intolerable. So
it's just every game and every series does not need to be a referendum on who a player is. Giannis after game 2 was like, this dude's a fraud. He's not even a top 5 player. Is he an 82-game player? It's now they're tied 2-2 and are probably favorites to win this series given the Nets injuries. Nothing changed about Giannis. It was just it was a bad break for the Bucks at first. The Dante DiVincenzo injury, I think, really hurt them in this series, low-key. And now, obviously, all the Nets injuries mounting as well.
But also, if you have to start Dante DiVincenzo to the point where he's an enormous loss, even as a Nova alumni, I have to say, you probably aren't that deep at the shooting guard spot if that's your this is our premier shooting guard. We have now suffered an enormous loss. It doesn't bode well for you either way. But I agree with you. The referendum stuff is very annoying to me. Like with every singular tweet, you have like a guy whose profile picture is like not that guy whose username is something like season or icy this guy or icy D'Angelo Russell. It's like 25,000 followers who's like, ooh, ratio. Or like shut up. All of these fans are horrible. I can't stand it. There's no nuanced discourse anymore.
No. Well, there is. You just have to really like curate your Twitter timeline and my best advice, especially since having a kid, because now I really don't have time to do it. But it's like if someone tweets something dumb at you, just don't respond. Like, don't waste your time because you're not gonna like convince. All of a sudden, you're not gonna get in like a 20 tweet argument, and at the end, you know what? That's a really good point. I actually never saw it that way. Like, you're not gonna win. Just don't waste your time.
It's going to end up with an LMAO ratio with the block. It's exactly right. No one has ever admitted to being wrong on Twitter.
Right.
And it's going to lose you followers anyway. So it's not worth it. Bryan, thanks so much for stopping by. We have a game tonight. I have to go cover that game. I presume you are on baby duties tonight.
Hopefully my wife is I was on baby duty all day. So hopefully I will be able to at least enjoy the game before he ruins my night.
Wow. Okay. I love my son, but he might
yeah.
Bryan, you can find Bryan's work on Twitter. Obviously, I believe the handle is Toporek. You can also find him editing stuff on Bleacher Report and writing for Forbes on the business of sports and the NBA as a whole, and fan-sided apparently as well. I did not know that. But Bryan, thanks so much for stopping by.
Of course, Austin. Anytime, man.
Take care.